I read this article from Bounding into Comics. I may or may not go to the article, check it out, and read some of it. It wasn't a lengthy article, but it was a good one. And it was primarily about practical effects. I brought this up before because I brought up me watching the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, and how I thoroughly enjoyed those movies. And at times I watched and I remember thinking to myself, man, these special effects and for the time, how did they actually accomplish this? And that was before I knew anything about movies and special effects, exactly how all of it was done. This was years ago. Well, over the course of time, more information comes out. We see how these things are made, and you see that they used a lot of practical effects, primarily practical effects. Well, I say primarily. I know they used a lot of practical effects. I don't know, to what extent or what detail, but I remember seeing some of the behind the scenes on how things were done, how they displayed certain spacecraft and, ships and things like that. And it was amazing. Like it was done in such a simple and yet complex way that I believed what I saw. What I saw seemed like it was rooted in actual space and time. There's times when you're watching a movie, I think your brain can perceive things sometimes and you don't understand exactly why you notice that there's maybe something not wrong but different. And I remember watching, I wish I can remember what movie it was, but I remember watching this movie and thinking to myself, man, why does this seem off? And then seeing the behind the scenes footage, and a large portion of it was CGI. I can't remember exactly what movie it was. Practical effects, I think, bring you into the movie more, and in a real meaningful way, you feel more connected to the movie, even though you may not understand exactly why. So anyway, I'm going to get to this article from Bounding into Comics, exclusive interview with FX legend Robert Kurtzman, discuss the glorious days of practical effects past and their promising revival in the present at Nightmare Weekend. And I'm from what I read in the article, this is, I believe it's a new con based around horror flicks and just horror in general. Not really my thing, not really my shtick, but what I did appreciate about the article is the wealth of knowledge on practical effects and why this actually matters. So, with films, most people remember the actors in their roles more than anything, maybe the director or composers if it deeply resonates with them. It is the truly dedicated and perhaps even a little demented who have to know more about the individuals involved with the project, especially in the case of horror films. And during the 1980s, when there seemed to be a new one released into the theaters every single week. Timeless classics full of rubber mask, latex, and stop motion animation that might look dated through the eyes of younger moviegoers, but still look more realistic to a viewer whose matured brain rejects the CGI imagery it sees. I don't necessarily think I reject CGI outright. I think there's a good argument to be made for a balance between CGI and practical effects. I think a combination of both actually makes for a very well done movie. And I think it's more pleasing to the eye. Personally, I believe this. Let's see. The first wave introduced such pioneers like Rick Baker, An American Werewolf in London, The Funhouse and Stan Winston, The Terminator, and Aliens, who changed the game forever with their groundbreaking effects in the early 1980s. Not only did this create a demand for more of the same techniques when it came to creating monsters, but those designs are what influence the next wave of artists emerging from out of the darkness. And they are the ones who made that decade such a magical period. Creative visionaries such as Rick Botten, John Carpenter, The Thing, Legend, RoboCop, Tom Savini, Dawn of the Dead, Creepshow, Friday the 13th. And then there's the man of the hour, Robert Kurtzman. He has been in the horror business for over 4 decades, and he has since built a resume that most up and coming artists would dare consider aspiring to, even within their deepest, darkest dreams. He was on set creating the hideous looks for all of our favorite Fright Fests, from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, to Predator, Darkman, Tremors, The People Under the Stairs, Dr. Giggles, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, 13 Ghosts, Hostel, Tusk, and I do really need to do I really need to keep going. This dude has had an extensive career. The VFX wizard attended the Nightmare Weekend convention in Chicago, even though it's actually the suburb of Rosemont, Illinois, this past weekend for its inaugural outing. And he was kind enough to have a chat with yours truly on Sunday morning. We talked about the past, present, and future of practical effects. The attendance at the convention seemed low for such an all-star lineup of guests, but everyone made the best of it and still had a good time. Something which I commented about to Mr. Kurtzman, along with making witty remarks about currently vacated seat of the highest position of Catholicism, and it was a little too soon for such jokes in retrospect. So I guess this is a new convention. There is so many new conventions popping up for various things within the geek space. Geeks definitely have a lot going on. So I guess I would imagine, I bet the Saska sisters knew about this because they're into horror. That's their thing. I believe that's where they got their start. Again, not my thing at all. I have never been in a horror. So I guess this is the interviewer, Dante Arix. Robert Kurtzman, how are you today? Doing great, man. It's the last day of Nightmare Weekend. Are you ready to leave yet? Oh, I'm ready to go home. I've got some work to do this week, and I just keep thinking about it. And of course, they got some different masks, practical effects masks that you would, I guess, put on somebody. I guess, this is from Tusk. Yo, and like I said, practical effects, there's something to be said. I think The Mandalorian, I believe the first 2 seasons used a combination of practical effects, CGI, and a background screen that showed all the different backdrops. If I'm not mistaken, that's what they use, which to me, like I said, that you kind of get into the scenery just a little bit more. I like the way it looks. It works. I like when I'm looking at something on screen that's fantastical, but I know it's an actual thing. I can't really explain that. Right on. What's up with the low head count? Not that I'm a fan of large crowds or anything, but there should still be way more people here. And I'm assuming if it's inaugural, probably many people didn't even know about it. Oh, I don't know. It's their Nightmare Weekend, first year here. Smirking, maybe the Pope is in town. So yeah, Kurtzman said the same thing. It's the inaugural go. So it's gonna take, if it happens again, I would imagine it's gonna take years of people knowing about it, and then it's probably gonna draw a large crowd. But like I said, horror is not my thing, but I was definitely more interested in the things he said about practical effects. I was about to say special effects, practical effects. And you can go on and read the article. I'll post a link in the description. I won't read the whole thing, but in the article, he says, Kurtzman said pretty much the same thing that I think. He said CGI is not going to go away, nor should it, but there should be a balance. He felt like there should be a balance, a mix, a meld of the two, both special effects and practical effects. And I think when you do that, because look, there's going to be times where I don't know if practical effects are always the most affordable, because you have to build large apparatuses and animatronics and sets. And sometimes it may be cheaper just to hire a studio to do some CGI versus all of that manual stuff you have to do. I get that. But I think there's times when it's like, yo, you really didn't need to use CGI for that. Like, you could have done that with practical effects and it would have actually looked more natural. It would have flowed better and you wouldn't have had to have so many different camera cuts because it's a practical effect. You can just allow the camera to free flow. And I think that's the way to go. Personally, I think that's the way to go. Watching movies, I think I brought it up when I started the video. Watching movies like Godzilla Minus One and seeing the mix of CGI and practical effects, and I'm almost positive they used more practical effects than anything, and that movie really wowed me. The cinematography wowed me. I thought when I watched it legitimately, I didn't realize why I liked it so much. This is why I said what I said about practical effects. I was like, yo, the way this movie was shot, everything was so fluid, and I'm going on, and then I, find out afterward that a lot of what they did was practical effects, including some of the cities. And I was like, this is what it was. This is what it was. That made a huge difference. I think another thing that was brought up in an article is Kirkman, I believe he mentioned the fact that there seems to be a greater desire for practical effects, especially in the streaming market, shows that are on these different streaming platforms. And I think this is one of the areas where streaming may have really added something good to the entertainment space, because outside of that, maybe, I'm not saying for sure, but maybe practical effects would have just went away. Probably not, because there's different production studios, especially overseas, that they use this a lot. I'm drawing a blank now. I don't know why. The studio who did Godzilla Minus One, I don't know why I can't remember it right now at this moment. But I believe when I did some research, there's definitely more practical effects used by them than not. So there's always a group that's going to do this. And I think it's good. I think this adds a level of quality to movies because it is a little more personal. Look, when you have a studio, whatever big name studio you want to bring up, that does the CGI, it's not really just one person. It's done by so-and-so studios. Now, you might be able to look up who works for these companies, and you might find somebody, one of these people who work for these companies that maybe post on social media, and you can see, oh, this is one of the people who worked on this project that did this thing. But with practical effects, you typically know who is involved. That gives you another layer of connection to a movie. Was it Toho Studios? I think it's Toho Studios that did Godzilla Minus One. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think that was the studios. Anyway, neither here nor there. It just came to my mind. It is wonderful to see because special effects is an art. And I think to completely abandon practical effects, I think that's to the detriment of the entertainment industry. So I like seeing this. I like seeing the fact that practical effects are not a thing of a bygone era. And there are people now who still know what's going on. This is where we really need to get a group of people who are interested, who love this stuff, to really study behind some of the greats like this so they can learn all of the tricks of the trade and continue this stuff moving forward.